Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to do something a little different. I want you to visualize something with me. Imagine you're walking into a movie theater. You buy your ticket, you get your popcorn, the lights dim, and you settle in. You think you're about to watch a documentary about schools, maybe something a little dry, something about budgets or curriculum changes. But then the music starts. The images flash across the screen, and about 10 minutes in, you realize you aren't watching a documentary at all.
You're watching a horror movie.
Exactly. You're watching a horror movie.
It's a vivid image to start with, but honestly, looking at the stack of papers we have on the desk today, it feels completely appropriate. We aren't just looking at a standard government report here. We are analyzing the EDCOM 2 final report on Philippine education. And that term, horror story, that is my phrasing, that comes directly from one of our primary sources, just a searing editorial from Rappler dated today, February 2, 2026.
That editorial really didn't pull any punches, did it? I mean, usually policy discussions are so sanitized. They talk about optimizing metrics or recalibrating budget allocations. But here, we are seeing phrases like strong stomach required, a darkness that awaits, and a squandered future. It feels like they're describing a crime scene, not a school system.
In a very real way, they are. They're describing the crime of neglect, really, over decades. The twin malaise of poverty and ignorance, as they put it. And the reason the language is so visceral, so, aggressive, is that the data has finally caught up with what people have been feeling for years.
The anecdotal reality.
Precisely. EDCOM 2, that's the Second Congressional Commission on Education, spent 3 years digging into this. I mean, they turned over every rock. And what they found wasn't just, a dip in grades or a bad semester. It was a structural collapse.
A collapse. That's a heavy word.
It is, but it's the only word that fits. When you read the details, which we will definitely get into, you realize we're looking at the foundational cracks in the society itself. And frankly, if that phrase, twin malaise of poverty and ignorance, doesn't grab your attention, I don't know what will.
So our mission today is to stare into that abyss. We need to unpack why the experts are so terrified. We're going to look at the numbers that make this a horror story. But, and this is really important, we aren't just here to doom scroll. We're not here just to make you feel bad.
Right.
Because alongside this report, there is a response. There's a plan on the table called the NAT plan.
Right. And that's the real tension of this deep dive, isn't it? On one hand, you have the diagnosis. The patient is in critical condition. On the other, you have the prescription. The National Education and Workforce Development Plan.
A huge plan.
It's a massive whole-of-government attempt to stop the bleeding. Our job today is to connect the dots between the terrifying stats like literacy rates that frankly shouldn't be statistically possible and the boring invisible stuff like supply chains, nutrition, and bureaucracy that actually cause them.
It's like we're forensic accountants, but for education. We need to find out where the money, or in this case, the learning, just disappeared. Let's start with the segment the editorial calls Read and Weep. That's literally the headline. And I think for a lot of people listening, they might have a vague sense that education is bad. They see the news, they hear stories, but they don't know how bad.
No, they assume it's a C- situation. They think, oh, maybe the kids are struggling with calculus or, maybe they aren't memorizing history dates perfectly.
Exactly. They think it's a rigorous struggle. So let's just shatter that illusion right now. Let's look at grade 7.
Okay. So picture a grade 7 student. They're 12 or 13 years old. They finished 6 full years of elementary school. They've graduated. They had the diploma. They're in high school now.
Right. New uniform, bigger campus, multiple teachers.
The whole thing. The EDCOM 2 data shows that 88% of these students cannot read at a grade 7 level.
88%.
88. Almost 9 out of 10.
I want to pause on that because it's so easy to just gloss over a percentage like that.
It is.
If you are a teacher standing in front of a class of, 50 students, that means 44 of them are staring at you with a blank expression because they cannot comprehend the textbook you just handed them.
Effectively, yes.
Yeah.
They might be able to read the words phonetically. They can say the cat sat on the mat. They can sound out the syllables. But you give them a paragraph about Philippine history or basic biology and ask, why did this happen? Or what is the main idea here? They can't do it.
They can't extract the meaning.
No. They are functionally illiterate for the level of education they are currently enrolled in.
That is just, it's mind-boggling. I mean, how do you even teach? If I'm a history teacher, what do? Do I just read out loud and hope they memorize the sounds?
That's often what happens. Or you simplify the material down to a grade 1 level, which completely defeats the purpose of high school. You aren't teaching, you're babysitting. Or you're performing a play that almost no one in the audience understands.
Wow.
But here's where it gets really dark. The sources track this progression of failure. It doesn't just start at grade 7.
Right, of course not. It isn't like they walked into high school and suddenly forgot how to read.
No, it's a slide. A long, painful slide. The report traces this all the way back. By grade 3, you already have about 30% of students failing in proficiency. So a third of the class is already left behind by age 9.
A third.
But the system just keeps moving, and the gap widens. By the time you get to grade 7, boom, it's 88%. But the real kick in the gut, the number that I frankly had to triple check because I thought it was a typo, is grade 12.
This is the end of the line. These are the graduates, the finished products of our K-12 system. They're 17, maybe 18 years old.
The proficiency rate for grade 12 students is 0.4%.
Wait, say that again?
0.4%.
0.4, not 4%.
No, not even 1/2 of 1%.
That's statistical noise. That is basically
In here, total collapse. I mean, if it's were a car factory and you produced 1,000 cars a day and 996 of them rolled off the assembly line with no engines or like square wheels,
right,
you wouldn't say we have a quality control issue.
Yeah.
You would say the factory's fundamentally broken. You'd shut it down. You'd probably call the police.
And yet these students are graduating. They're getting diplomas.
They're walking across the stage, wearing the toga, getting the handshake from the principal, taking the picture with their parents.
Mm-hmm.
But that piece of paper, and this is the harsh truth the report forces us to confront, that piece of paper is a lie.
Wow.
It certifies a proficiency that 99.6% of them simply do not possess.
That is devastating. I mean, imagine being that student. You think you're ready for the world, you have the paper, and then you try to apply for a job or go to college, and you realize you have been defrauded by the system for 12 years.
It is a fraud. That's a strong word, but what else do you call it? And the editorial says that if this isn't fixed, the country will be literally in the gutter within a decade.
In the gutter.
That's strong language. It evokes a very specific image of, well, ruin.
It does.
It's accurate, though. Think about the global economy. We aren't competing in a vacuum. The Philippines is competing with Vietnam, Thailand, India, Eastern Europe. If your labor force, your entire generation of new workers, cannot read complex instructions, cannot do basic analysis, lacks fundamental math skills, you just can't build a modern economy.
We're stuck.
You're stuck with low-value manual labor. You can't attract the tech giants.
Right.
You can't build the startups. You're just stuck.
But the source goes deeper than just economics, doesn't it? It mentions something that I think is even scarier. The fight against disinformation.
This is the existential threat. I mean, look, we live in the age of algorithms, deep fakes, AI-generated lies. We live in a world where your phone is constantly feeding you information designed to manipulate you. Navigating social media today requires a high level of critical thinking. You need to be able to look at a source and ask, is this true? Who wrote this? What's their agenda? Does the logic even hold up?
And if you can't even read the text properly.
Then you have zero defense. You are completely defenseless against manipulation. If 99.6% of your population lacks proficiency, you are building a society that is incredibly vulnerable to populism, to scams, to historical revisionism.
So it's not just about getting a job.
No. It's about whether the democracy itself can function. Can a democracy survive if the electorate cannot process the truth?
That's the horror story. The monster isn't under the bed. The monster is the fact that we can't read the warning sign on the door. But usually in a horror story, there's a clear villain, right? A vampire, a zombie, a guy in a mask.
Sure.
Here, the monster is much more complex. It's not just bad teachers or lazy students. The report identifies root causes that go way, way back before the kids even get to school.
We have to talk about biology.
The stunting crisis.
This is where the whole conversation shifts from education to public health. The EDCOM 2 report highlights that 23.6% of Filipino children suffer from stunting. That's nearly 1 in 4.
And for listeners who might just think stunting means short, can you just clarify the medical reality here? Because I think stunted sounds almost harmless, like, oh, he's just petite.
It is a dangerous misconception that it just means you're small. Stunting is a marker for chronic malnutrition during the most critical window of brain development, from conception to age 2 or 3. The source uses the phrase irreversible neurological damage.
Irreversible. That one word just carries so much weight.
It means you cannot fix it later. If a child doesn't get enough protein and micronutrients during those first 1,000 days, the brain physically does not develop the neural connections it needs. The synapses don't form properly. It affects memory, cognitive processing, impulse control. Everything.
So when the editorial says our youth are losing brain power, they mean it literally. We are losing actual capacity.
Literally. And here is the tragedy of it all. You can fix the schools later. You can build the best classrooms, hire Nobel Prize winners as teachers, give every kid an iPad. But if that child belongs to the 23.6% who are stunted, their hardware is already compromised. They are, as the report puts it, handicapped from the starting line.
It changes how you view that grade 7 classroom we talked about earlier. If a quarter of them physically struggle to process information because of something that happened when they were toddlers, well, blaming the grade 7 teacher seems completely unfair.
It is unfair. You're asking a teacher to upload complex software onto a computer that has a damaged processor. And it exposes the failure of the entire government apparatus, not just the schools. The report points out that government feeding programs failed.
Failed how? I mean, we hear about feeding programs all the time in the news.
Execution. The report found that the feeding programs existed on paper, but they failed to reach the people who actually needed them. Maybe it was logistics. The trucks didn't get to the remote villages. Maybe it was corruption. Maybe it was just bad data. They didn't know where the hungry kids were. But the bottom line is, the food didn't get to the hungry kids in those critical first 1,000 days.
And then there's the infrastructure gap on top of that. The report talks about a lack of model-compliant daycare centers.
Right. This is the Early Childhood Care and Development, or ECCD. The law says we should have universal access to these early development centers. But the report found a huge lack of compliance. So you have a law that promises care, but there's no building to provide it in.
Or you have a building but no trained worker.
Exactly. So the kids stay home, or they go to some substandard care, and the malnutrition continues completely unchecked.
And this leads us to that buzzword the Inquirer article mentioned, whole of government. Because when you look at stunting, you realize DepEd is helpless here.
Totally helpless. DepEd deals with kids from age 5 or 6 upwards. By then, for a quarter of them, the stunting damage is done. The game is already over for that critical phase of brain development.
So they're just dealing with the aftermath.
They are. The Department of Education explicitly called for help. They basically put their hands up and said, we cannot solve a problem that starts at age 0. Addressing nutrition requires the National Nutrition Council. It requires the Department of Health, the DOH. It requires the Department of Social Welfare and Development, DSWD.
And the local government units, right? The mayors and the barangay captains.
Crucially, yes. Because who builds the daycare center? The mayor. Who runs the local health center?
Yeah.
The LGU. If the DOH and the LGU fail to feed the child at age 2, DepEd inherits a tragedy at age 6.
It's like a relay race where the first runner just drops the baton and then the last runner gets blamed for losing the entire race.
That is a perfect analogy. The whole of government approach, the NAT plan, is basically an attempt to get the first 3 runners to actually hold on to the baton and pass it correctly.
Okay, so we've established that the students are entering the system with a massive biological disadvantage, but let's not let the school system off the hook entirely.
No, not at all.
Because 75% of kids aren't stunted, and yet proficiency is near 0. So something is happening inside the schools that is also destroying learning.
Absolutely. The report identifies several institutional habits that are actively harmful. The first one is the mass promotion policy.
Mass promotion. It sounds like a marketing campaign. Buy one grade, get one free.
I wish it were. It's effectively a policy of social promotion. It means passing a student to the next grade level, regardless of whether they have mastered the skills of their current grade.
Wait, hold on. So if I'm in grade 4 and I fail the math exam and I fail the reading exam, I still go on to grade 5?
In many, many cases, yes. The report calls it an unspoken but institutionalized practice. It's not written in the rule book that says pass everyone, but the pressure and the practice on the ground make it the de facto rule.
But why? Why would a school do that? It seems completely self-defeating. You're just setting them up to fail even harder next year.
It is self-defeating in the long run, but in the short run, it solves a lot of problems for the administrators. First, high failure rates look terrible for the school's performance metrics.
Oh, the number.
The numbers. Principals and teachers are pressured to show success. If you fail half your class, you look like a bad teacher. The school looks bad. Second, just physically, where do you put them all? If you held back 30% of your grade 3 students, your grade 3 class next year would be 30% bigger. You don't have the chairs, you don't have the room, you don't have the teachers.
So it's a logistical nightmare.
It's a logistical nightmare. So the system chooses the path of least resistance. It just pushed them up.
And the result is what the editorial called the shock absorber effect.
That's the term they used. The teacher in the next grade becomes the shock absorber. Imagine being a grade 8 science teacher. You're prepared to teach basic physics concepts, but you walk in and find that half your class reads at a grade 2 level.
What do you do?
You can't teach your curriculum. You have to stop and try to do remedial reading. But you don't have time for that. You have to cover the physics curriculum for the standardized test. So you get frustrated, the kids get frustrated, and nobody learns any science.
It's just a cascade of failure. It creates a classroom where learning is literally impossible because the gap between what is being taught and what can be understood is just too wide.
It just pushes the problem all the way up to grade 12 until you hand them a diploma that says graduate, but should probably say attendee.
Then there's the issue of time. We send kids to school for roughly 200 days a year, but the report is saying they aren't actually learning for those 200 days.
Not even close. There are two major thieves of time here. One is cultural, one is environmental. The cultural one is what the report calls festivals over fundamentals.
We do love a fiesta. The Philippines is world famous for it.
We do, and cultural heritage is important, of course. But the report found that schools are just overloaded with events. Drum and lyre competitions, beauty pageants, foundation days, barangay fiestas where the students are expected to perform.
Right.
And it's not just the day of the event itself. It's the week, sometimes weeks, of practice beforehand where classes are suspended so the kids can learn a dance routine.
I remember that so vividly from school. Okay, class, put away the math books. We need to practice the formation for the parade because the mayor is going to be watching.
Exactly.
Okay.
And while community spirit is great, every hour spent practicing a dance is an hour not spent learning to read. And when you are already so far behind, when you're already playing catch-up, you simply cannot afford to trade literacy for pageantry. The report essentially says we have prioritized the spectacle over the substance.
And the environmental thief.
Disasters.
This is a huge one. The Philippines is one of the most disaster-prone nations on Earth. Typhoons, floods, earthquakes, you name it. Historically, schools are the sturdiest buildings in a town.
Right. They're often the only concrete structures in rural areas.
They are. So when a typhoon hits, the school becomes the evacuation center.
Which is a humanitarian necessity, right? I mean, you can't let people drown or sleep in the rain. It is. You absolutely have to save lives. But educationally, it's catastrophic. The source notes significant learning losses. Classes just stop. And not just for the day of the typhoon. Sometimes for weeks, even months, while the school is being occupied by evacuees. Or even after they leave, the school has to be cleaned, repaired, repainted.
So the school year just becomes Swiss cheese. There are holes everywhere.
Precisely. If you combine the mass promotion, the festivals, and the disasters, the actual instructional time, the time the student spends genuinely engaged with the subject, is just a fraction of what it's supposed to be on paper. We say they had 200 days of school, but maybe they really only had 120 days of actual learning, if that.
And we haven't even touched on the people at the front of the room yet, the teachers. The report dives into this diploma mills issue. This was surprising to me because the requirement to get promoted is to have a master's degree. You'd think that would increase quality.
You would think so.
Usually a master's degree means you're an expert.
It's a classic case of a well-intentioned policy creating a completely perverse incentive. The Department of Education said, to be a master teacher or a principal, you need a Master of Arts degree. The goal, obviously, was to have highly educated leaders. That sounds smart.
On the surface, it makes perfect sense. You want the best and brightest leading your schools.
But the system didn't care where you got the degree or what you learned. It just checked a box. Do you have the paper? So the market responded. Low-quality higher education institutions, what we call diploma mills, started churning out MA degrees.
Pay the fee, get the B.
Pretty much. Minimum attendance, a copy-pasted thesis, very little rigor. Teachers enrolled not to become better educators, but to get the salary bump and the promotion. So you have a system full of people with advanced degrees on paper, but whose actual teaching skills haven't improved one bit. The report identifies this credentialism as a major block to real quality. We're incentivizing the paper, not the skill.
It just seems like everywhere we look, biology, policy, culture, personnel, there is a trap. A systemic trap. But there is one more layer to this onion, the bureaucracy itself, the people running the show from the top, the silos.
This is the core structural flaw. In many countries, there is one Ministry of Education, one head, one plan. In the Philippines, we split it into three. You have DepEd for basic education, K to 12. You have CHE for college and university. And you have TESDA for technical and vocational skills.
The trifecta.
But they act like three rival kingdoms. The report describes them as silos with fragmented programs. They don't talk to each other enough, they don't share data enough, they have overlapping mandates, and they fight over budget and turf.
The expert analysis highlighted student financial assistance as a prime example of this mess.
It's a perfect example of the waste it creates. You have scholarship programs in DepEd, you have scholarships in CHED, you have scholarships in TESDA, but there's no central database.
So they're not talking to each other.
Not effectively. So you might have one really smart, savvy kid who gets 3 scholarships, while another kid in extreme poverty gets 0, because they didn't know which of the 3 websites to check or which form to fill out. It's inefficient targeting. It's like throwing money at a wall and just hoping some of it sticks to the right people.
Okay, I think we have stared into the abyss long enough. The listener is probably thinking, okay, I get it. It's total disaster. I need a drink. Is there any way out of this?
Right.
And this is where we pivot to the NAT plan.
The National Education and Workforce Development Plan.
It sounds like a very, very bureaucratic name for what is essentially a rescue mission.
It does, but the philosophy behind it is the direct antidote to the silo problem. It's this whole-of-government approach. It was handed over to President Marcos Jr. as a 10-year blueprint for recovery.
Education Secretary Sonny Angara was quoted in the Inquirer article. He said, "The roadmap is clear, but delivery will depend on how well the entire government moves together."
And that's the admission right there. It's DepEd saying we cannot do this alone. The NAT plan is basically a peace treaty between government agencies to finally work together. It's an admission that the silo system has completely failed.
Let's look at how this works in practice. Workforce alignment. This is something businesses complain about constantly. The skills mismatch.
Oh, all the time. You hear it constantly. We need data scientists, but the colleges are still producing thousands of nursing graduates. Or we need high-tech welders, but everyone wants to be a hotel manager. There's a fundamental disconnect between what the economy needs and what the schools are producing.
So the NAT plan wants to fix that.
It wants to build a pipeline. It proposes linking CHED, TESDA, and the Professional Regulation Commission, the PRC, to create a coordinated system.
A pipeline? How does that work?
Instead of just guessing what to teach, they want to use data, hard data. The plan involves bringing in the Philippine Statistics Authority, the PSA, and the Department of Labor and Employment, TOLE. The goal is to build a unified labor market information system.
So like a giant dashboard for the economy.
Exactly. A dashboard that says, hey, in 2028, the semiconductor industry in Laguna is going to need 5,000 technicians with these specific skills. The schools in TESDA see that signal, and they adjust their curriculum now. So when those kids graduate in 2028, the jobs are actually there, and they have the skills to fill them.
It's closing the feedback loop between the economy and education.
It's common sense. But in a siloed bureaucracy, common sense is revolutionary. It stops the incredible waste of producing graduates for jobs that don't exist.
Now, plans are great, roadmaps are great. I feel like we've seen a lot of roadmaps in the Philippines over the years that just end up gathering dust. These things usually die in implementation. What needs to change legally to make this actually happen? Because you can't just wish it into existence. Secretary Angara listed a whole laundry list of legislative demands.
He did.
One that stood out to me was the local school board funds, or the SEF. Can you unpack that? It sounds technical, but I know it involves a lot of money.
It's huge money. So if you own property, a house, a piece of land, you pay real property tax every year. A certain chunk of that tax automatically goes into the Special Education Fund, or SEF. It sits with the local government.
Okay, so the mayor has this big pot of money specifically for schools.
Yes. But the laws on how that money can be spent are from the 1990s. They are incredibly rigid. They often restrict spending to just building new classrooms or like funding sports meets.
Right.
But maybe what that specific town needs isn't a new building. Maybe they have enough rooms. Maybe what they really need is a remedial reading program for grade 3. Maybe they need a feeding program to fight stunting. Maybe they need internet data for the teachers.
But the law says no, you can only buy bricks and paint.
Exactly. The hands of the mayors are tied. So updating the SEF law would give local mayors the flexibility to spend that money on the actual problems identified by EDCOM 2, like nutrition or learning recovery, rather than just infrastructure they might not even need. It unlocks billions of pesos that are currently being spent inefficiently.
There's also the Adopt a School program expansion.
That's about acknowledging a simple truth. The government is broke. We have a massive deficit. We need the private sector to step in. This reform would give better, clearer tax incentives to companies that invest in schools. It's not just charity. It's making it a smart business decision to help the local high school get better equipment or teacher training.
And then the staffing reforms. This sounds really boring.
It's the boring HR stuff that actually matters the most.
Correct.
The report notes that when we added 2 years to high school with K-12 and then made college free, we exploded the workload for the agencies.
Of course.
But we didn't update their organizational charts. You have people doing the work of 3 staff members because the positions don't exist. The NAP plan calls for the Department of Budget and Management, DBM, to approve more slots, better pay grades, and modernized structures. Again, DepEd needs DBM.
Yeah.
It's the whole of government thing. You can't fix the schools if the people running the bureaucracy are completely burned out.
It strikes me that a lot of this relies on institutional discipline. That's a phrase used in the report, and it sounds important.
That is basically code for, please, please don't cancel this when the president changes in a few years.
The classic Philippine political cycle.
It is. A new administration comes in, scraps all the old programs, renames everything, starts from scratch just to be different, put their own stamp on it. Institutional discipline means sticking to this 10-year plan, regardless of who wins the next election.
Yeah.
It means treating education as a non-negotiable, non-political foundation. It means saying we might disagree on taxes or foreign policy, but we all agree that the NAP plan stays.
Which brings us to the conclusion of this deep dive. We have the horror story. We have the roadmap. Where do we land emotionally? I mean, should we be hopeful or just depressed?
Well, the Rappler editorial actually finds a silver lining. They call it a golden gift.
A golden gift. What is the gift?
The gift is clarity. For years, we knew something was wrong, but we were arguing about anecdotes. Oh, the kids are lazy now, or the teachers aren't strict enough. We were all just guessing. Now, thanks to the massive work of EDCOM 2, we have the diagnosis. We know it's stunting. We know it's the silos. We know it's mass promotion. The gift is that the problem is no longer a mystery. We have the map out of the gutter.
But having a map doesn't mean you'll actually reach the destination.
No, it doesn't. And the editorial warns about the turmoil created by power grabs and corruption finger-pointing. Politics creates noise, a lot of noise. The real question is, can the leaders tune out the noise and focus on the signal? Can they look at a chart about stunted babies and care about it more than their latest poll numbers?
And the clock is ticking. This isn't a problem we can just park for 5 years and come back to.
It's a race. AI is not waiting for the Philippines to catch up. The global economy is not waiting. Every year we delay implementing this. That plan is another cohort of grade 1 students entering the system with a biological disadvantage. It's another batch of that irreversible damage.
So let's just recap for a moment. We started with 0.4% proficiency, a functional system collapse. We traced it back to stunting, mass promotion, and these bureaucratic silos. We looked at the NAP plan as the potential fix, if the government can act as one single unit.
A comprehensive if? Yeah, terrifying picture.
And I want to address the listener directly now. Why should you care about this? Maybe you don't have kids. Maybe your kids are already grown. Maybe you're retired and this all seems like someone else's problem.
You should care because you live here. These students are the ones who are struggling to read in grade 7 right now. They are your future nurses. They are your future mechanics. They are the entrepreneurs who are supposed to drive the economy. And, maybe most importantly, they are the voters.
The electorate.
A democracy assumes an informed citizenry. If your citizens cannot process information, cannot distinguish fact from fiction, your democracy becomes incredibly fragile. The literacy crisis is fundamentally a crisis of democracy. It affects your safety, your wallet, and your freedom. You just cannot build a first world nation with a third world education system.
I want to leave you with one final thought. Something that wasn't explicitly in the conclusion of the report, but it's been haunting me after reading all of this. We talked about irreversible neurological damage for that 23.6% of stunted kids.
The hard biological truth.
If that is true, if the damage is genuinely irreversible, then educational reform is great for the next generation, the babies being born today. The NAP plan, if it works, will help them. But what about the millions of kids who are already here? The 15-year-olds who read at a grade 1 level? The ones the system has already broken?
That's the heavy question, isn't it?
What does society owe them? We can't just fix the schools for the future and ignore the generation we have already failed. Do we need a massive social safety net? Do we need a different kind of job market designed for them? Or are we just, writing them off as a lost generation?
The NAP plan looks forward. But we have a moral obligation to look at the present, too. We can't just step over the people we failed on our way to building a better future.
That's the question we leave with you. This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.